Welcome to Planning and Beyond, the podcast where financial planning meets human understanding. I'm your host, Ashley Quamme, and today I am joined by my long-term friend, Alex slash Dr. Alex slash super cool human slash licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of the Financial Psychology Center out in LA, Alex slash all the slashes. Welcome to the show, friend. I'm glad to have you here.
We
Yeah,
finally get to do this. It's been a
finally.
little overdue, but I've been following you on LinkedIn and social media, and I love the work that you're doing.
Well, likewise. And actually, today, what is super exciting is that we're here to talk about your work, the work that you've been doing. And you've been doing this work, which we will name here more specifically. You've been doing this work for quite a while. So let's talk about what that work is before we get into maybe the cool news, like what we're really here to talk about. Let's talk about just all the other work that's come before this. Like, who are you?
Mm,
What are you do? Yeah, share a little bit about yourself.
sure. So let's take it all the way back, and before actually we dive in, I guess I want to say, like, if you're listening to a podcast about money, congratulations, right? You're already doing more financial self-care than half of America. But my background is I'm a marriage and family therapist out here in Los Angeles. And I was a garden variety therapist here in LA back in mid 2000s. And the Great Recession just started to creep up in 2007, 8, and 9. And all of a sudden, I started hearing my clients mentioning money things, all things related to money quite often, foreclosures on their homes, losing, quite a bit of their stock portfolios and so on and so on, and retirement. And that's when I started to look around at my fellow mental health therapists to ask, what are the resources that exist out there to help, our clients deal with financial stress, anxiety, and all things related to money. And unfortunately, at that time, 2008, 9, 10, it was, all I heard was crickets. And as one of my colleagues at that time said, since you're already so interested in doing this, why don't you kind of go back to school and get a doctorate and sort of be one of the
Like that's so
pavers of
easy.
the way. Yeah. And so fast forward, we're all, overnight successes, 10 years in the making, 15 years in the making, something like that. So here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. Well, I have been familiar with your work for some time. Some of that is specifically because you are an LMFT like myself. And, I thought that that was very interesting when I came into this space and looking at what you were doing, and learning from you. What I like most about, what you have currently been working on is this idea around, and you kind of already named it here, like financial self care. And what does that look like? Now, I know that for those listening to the show, those that tend to listen to Planning and Beyond, the advisor community, they know that we talk about self care here on the show. And so that is likely not a new concept, self care. But let's talk about financial self care. How do you define that? What is that?
Well, I think of financial self care as a set of compassionate, relatable money practices that can help a person feel safer, feel clear, and more capable with money, especially when it comes to stress, right? And so as you just mentioned, we're so often hear, narratives and themes out there in social media about self-care, improving our self-care, and what all of that looks like. And usually it's, taking a walk, working out, eating healthier, sort of the usual suspects. And that actually tells us that, this is a helpful story where people are engaging in self-care, and many reports report really a lot of benefit coming from self-care, less stress, less physical health issues, and so on and so on. But the data also kind of quietly points to something that is a kind of a catch, that most of it happens in small bursts. And overall, we're just kind of too busy in our lives. We're, running around trying to earn, have a job and a side gig. I know in LA that's very common. especially for families who have kids, being able to provide for your family, and the cost of living, and the median income is rising and rising and rising. Or so that's really at the crux of regular self-care, right? And even globally, the World Health Organization has emphasized that self-care is an essential long-term health improvement for chronic conditions. Now, there's a gap, right? And this gap exists between traditional self-care, which often skips the stressor that's very quietly driving so many of our overwhelming emotions, our feelings of being triggered and activated in our nervous system, which is money, right? As so many of us in the financial services and mental health field, and anybody who is a financial therapist, we know the statistic that according to the APA, it's long been highlighted that money has been the number one stressor for most Americans. I think it's actually been since 2008, if I'm not mistaken. So we end up with this strange split, right? Do I do meditation
Do I go on
or
a walk?
we talk
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah.
Do I need to sleep more, or what do I need to do to kind of address the elephant in the room of this, financial stress that keeps being so pervasive? And as a practitioner, a financial psychologist who works with people and organizations and groups, you know, the tightness of the chest, the shallow breath, racing thoughts, all of those are there and constant, unfortunately, for so many people. So that's where kind of the, the journey of my new project, Calm Money, begins. Calm Money is actually a book and a financial self-care journal in the form of a workbook. And that journey, again, really started when so many of my clients came into my room, and it didn't start with like a budget or a spreadsheet or a financial portfolio. It started with a feeling. I kept seeing, my clients who are smart, they're capable, they are hardworking people who weren't bad with money. They were just living in this quiet state of financial tension, stress, overwhelmment, and deep shame. And I guess, some of them felt like they were controlled by money and try to control every dollar as a result. And then others kind of felt that there's so much uncertainty that was almost unbearable, right? So a lot of clients report back that their relationship with money can be really extreme, and it kind of pushes them into mindsets of, oh, I'll deal with it tomorrow, right? That's the avoidance piece. And then, oh, I have to fix it right here, right now. That's the vigilance piece. And really the biggest question that came out of that was, why does money feel like this? Right? It's almost like, that's a therapist in me, the experiential practitioner in me raised that question. And that question became really actually the center of my first book called Financial Psychology: Restoring Financial Wellness in the Post-COVID Economy. And when I zoomed out, I saw at that time that there's an epidemic of financial stress that we were not talking about, right? And it was built on a premise. That book was built on a premise that I actually still believe to this day, which is that financial literacy plus financial psychology equals financial health. Because just information alone, in my experience, doesn't really calm our nervous system. It doesn't soothe us to be able to make the right choice financially. And unfortunately, I wish this was so, but mindset alone also doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
What's
I was
yours that?
thinking in my mind, like around financial self-care, and was laughing, I guess, because, in my mind, I was like, man, it sure would be nice if I just went for a walk, like more money showed up in my bank account. Like, or if I just went for a walk, then like this financial stress like would be solved. Like the self-care part, doing things that calm our nervous system, that are restorative, that are, I would say even like therapeutic, like for us to take care of our body and mind. Like those things often don't take care of our finances. So I love that you mentioned that gap, and then even bringing that forward to talking about financial literacy, plus financial, you said wellness. What was the word that you said?
Financial psychology.
Financial
How we
psychology.
think
Oh my
about
gosh, how did
money.
I miss that? All right, how many cups of coffee have I had? Clearly not enough.
Yeah, that's a
financial
modern.
literacy. I know I'm jealous. Financial literacy plus financial psychology is financial wellness. And so I think that is really important because it isn't just knowledge and it isn't just self care, right? That can help us
Right.
as
It's a
we
combination of the
navigate.
two.
As we navigate. Now, you also mentioned your new project, and your new project is a new book that just released,
Yes.
Calm Money. You were giving us a little bit of preview there, I think, kind of with it, but let's dive in. Like, tell us a little bit more. Like, what's Calm Money about? What are people who read it? What are they going to take away from it? What are they going to learn from it?
I think I want to kind of go back to my first book, and the reason why is the context is important. That particular book, even though it focused on financial stress, the question or the comment that I got as a result of writing that book was, this is great information, but how do I apply this? What do I do? Where is the how to? And really, that's where the impetus for Calm Money really came from. And as a therapist, you know that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. That's a common narrative in therapy. And I think this is a really important piece to, why and how I wrote this particular book, because you and I are fans of so many amazing authors in the financial wellness space. There's not a shortage of great books and information and literacy. But I felt like there was still a missing piece that I wanted to write the most empathic, therapeutic book about money that I could muster, right? And birth it into the world. And I wrote Calm Money in from a standpoint of being disarming, of having a curious voice that really meets my clients exactly where they are, especially like in the messy middle, where there's shame and fear and financial stress and all the things that I see, day to day in my therapy room, whether it's telehealth or on my couch, therapeutic couch. And I wanted to write this book for the client who's really struggling the most. And I had a couple of clients in my mind, and I almost had to do a meditative sort of exercise before I would sit down to write and really think of those particular clients and what they would need out of this book.
Mm.
And what are they struggling with? That the one client who feels that they're behind, they're stuck, they're too even exhausted to pretend to have it all together, that kind of thing. And I guess that's the therapist in me, the empath in me, that I wanted to offer this not judgmental empathic guide, that it's not based on perfection or theory, and it's no shot at all to all of the financial literacy and financial wellness books out there. But I wanted this book to allow the space for mistakes, for repair, for growth.
And also, I think one of the things you said that resonates with me, and I share a passion as well, is the practical aspect of how do I do this? Like, what does it look like? And I find that in a different way, like working with advisors and partnering with them is similar in the sense of they might say, yeah, hey, all of this financial psychology stuff, all of this communication, learning,
Human side of money.
it makes sense, right? Like, I get it, it makes sense, but then, like, what does it look like in practice? Like, how do I actually do it? And I think that that gap is where it's exciting to see, people like you writing and starting to fill in like that gap of there's stress, right? We can validate maybe why there is stress, where does it come from, all of the aspects like around it, but then how do we care for it? Like, how do we attune to it? And it sounds like that's what, calm money, right, really is bringing that like how to piece, answering that question there for clients.
And you hit the nail on the head that, calm money is really filling that need, that gap, where again, I go back mentally to so many of my clients who some of them can't even fathom, calling up a financial advisor. Mentally, they're not even in the same universe as somebody who has enough money and is confident enough financially to be able to take that step. Yet others have the money, have the wealth, but they have the loss aversion, right? And that's the roadblock when they work with their financial advisors. And I'm sure a lot of, your financial planning audience can relate to that. So the book again is not it's not about fixing people and fixing the mistakes. It's more about helping them feel safe enough to understand their money story. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that term is really thrown around quite a bit, but it's so, so powerful when you actually see a client have an aha moment and and something really clicks and they really understand their money story. And inadvertently it helps to soothe their nervous system. This aha moment is almost like a double-sided coin, if I may say that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so all right, I'm going to pull back a little bit because I'm imagining, and I could be wrong, but I am imagining a listener, a financial advisor. I always picture Clayton when I do this exercise, which I should probably ask him if that's offensive. He gets offended that I do this, but I always think about like what questions like he might have or thoughts. And so one of the things that's coming up for me that an advisor or listener might be thinking is they might be thinking, okay, Alex, like this sounds great, like financial self-care and like filling in this gap. But when I'm working with clients, like what does that maybe sound like? Like, how would I know that they might need some financial self-care? How do I know that they need, calm money? Like, what might that sound like? Can you paint us a picture here?
Absolutely. So I'm thinking of so many colleagues who, in conversation, whether it's just chatting or real sort of business strategy and development, when they come into my office and they're beyond frustrated and they're telling me about a client and they sat down with that client or many different clients and they've gone over the portfolio, they've gone over the strategy, checked all the boxes. They had the conversation. The client nodded. They said they understood. And by the next meeting, nothing was implemented, right? Or only 50%. And for a lot of financial planners, that's a hard place to be that not the whole strategy was implemented. And so, again, I also wrote the Calm Money book from a bridging the gap narrative to financial planners and to mental health professionals. Here's the reframe that I think that if there's a financial plan or a budget, that financial plan or portfolio is sort of the front door to financial health, right? But financial self care is often sort of the back door. For a lot of people, it's kind of like walking through the door again, feels impossible, scary, threatening, all of that. It's what I would call a hot stove moment. And when we bring in the therapy, the psychology piece, the human side of money, the advisor may want to ask, what's your experience with money been like? Have you had hot stove moments with money? When you come in contact with money, what does that feel like? Is it painful every time? Right. And I've had these kind of conversations with planners, and again, that's an aha moment, a light bulb moment for them, that they didn't realize that their client, in between meetings, even though they've gone over the strategy, they've gone over the portfolio, they've gone over the financial plan, in between meetings, whenever the client came in contact with money, that contact was painful. And
From
how do
there,
we undo that? Right.
and how do we
And
undo
that's
that?
where
Yeah.
call money. That's the
Yeah.
prerequisite, the
Well, I
pre.
know how we do that. We buy them the book Call Money and send it
That's
to
right.
them, right? It's like, I know how to do
Available
that.
now on
Like
Amazon.
available now on Amazon, wherever you buy books. Yeah, I think that I like everything that you shared there and just painting that picture of like how a client shows up. And I'm glad that you actually mentioned like not following through because I feel like sometimes maybe there's a myth or a misconception that clients in distress or clients that are experiencing a lot of financial stress, like it's going to be written all over like their face and they're going to be actively like dysregulated, in front of you or like with you. But that's not always the case, right? They could be in need of financial self-care. They could be experiencing like financial stress and not be really anxious in front of you or with you. It might show up and it might look like not following through or avoidance or other things, right? Like that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that because those are also behavioral indicators, right? That might kind of point to, this client, we might need to ask a few different questions and also send them Alex's book there. I'm curious, like with couples, I love couples. Okay. So let's talk couples for a second. Like, what might, for like a financial planner, how might that show up as far as, a couple or maybe it's just one partner within the coupleship, like needing some kind of financial self care? What would they see there from a couple?
I think, first of all, thank you for mentioning all of the body language and everything that goes on internally with our bodies. That financial stress may not look like you think it would in the room. And as you were speaking, I thought of so many clients who mm, are overwhelmed with feelings of shame and saying the wrong thing or sounding smart or not being smart with money. So they may actually forego saying something in order to preserve a certain appearance that they understand. They will just nod as you're speaking. But in reality, unfortunately, they may not. And they're again just too self conscious, afraid to say how they're actually feeling. And then when, they leave your office and unfortunately don't necessarily implement some of the financial plan, maybe not, or any of the financial plan, there may be again more, it just builds that feeling of shame. And it reminds me of a saying that a triggered mind is a controlled mind.
Ooh, that's good.
A triggered mind is a controlled mind. So they may be going through fight, flight, and freeze in your office, and they may be in freeze right now. And they're controlled. They're maybe, I don't know, as severe as blanking out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that almost like
And they need
Stonewall
to
kind of like
restore
look.
them their emotional equilibrium back to a safe place. So calm money is that gentler entry point and a way in that doesn't require you to like force yourself to adhere to a budget, and force yourself past protective patterns before you get to self-regulate. And actually, I was speaking to a client of mine earlier this week, and she was just describing her state of being around money. And what she said was, so often, we as human beings are trying to fit ourselves into a framework, a portfolio framework, or financial plan framework. But it should be the opposite. It should be that we fit the framework around the human being and their intricacies.
Yeah. 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 If only, right? Or that easy, right? Yeah. I think what I love about this topic that we're talking about specifically to as it relates to financial advisors is what I have found, and I'm curious if this is maybe similar for you. What I have found is that advisors generally are amazing, like with their clients and recognizing needs, like maybe some financial self care or like, hey, you probably should give yourself a raise. Like, you haven't given yourself a raise in like several years. Like, it would be really good, like for you to do that. I find that most advisors are really good at attuning to their clients. But then if we pull the curtain back, sometimes they are not always the best, like on the home front with their partner or with themselves. And that might look like avoiding conversations or not putting themselves first, financially, maybe being on like autopilot and creating. I've talked to a lot of advisors where then that can create almost a deeper sense of shame, right? Like, I do this professionally for a living. It's kind of like, us as clinicians,
Yeah, exactly.
especially like doing couples therapy. Like, there's always this assumption that I had a perfect marriage. And
You
while
do.
I think that Clayton and I have a great relationship, like, it is not perfect, nor has it not had its own hurdles and struggles. So I think sometimes like there can be a shame around like I should be doing on the personal side, like my life, right? And so I want to maybe just take a moment, if you're okay with it. I would love to talk to maybe the advisors who maybe need some financial self-care for themselves. Like, let's maybe take the focus off of their client and, for you as the listener, like, I want to just talk about you for a second and how can maybe you employ some of this and create your own financial self-care. Alex, what would you say? I mean, have you experienced that too, just in your conversations and like the professional
Not me.
community?
First of all, I'm perfect. My marriage is perfect. I have the perfect credit score.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Same Z's.
But I love the this narrative, and you actually took me all the way back to the early days. when we talked about the Great Recession and, the difficulties that, we as Americans were experiencing, so many of us were experiencing financial stress. And we as therapists, psychologists, and mental health professionals are supposed to be the experts at handling stress. It doesn't matter if it's financial or any other type of stress. But in this particular realm, I'm sure you found the same thing, that mental health professionals haven't been extremely helpful and knowledgeable. And what became interesting is the research has shown that mental health professionals or any helping professionals are what's called money avoidant. And we're too afraid to talk about money. We're too afraid of even just dealing with numbers. I hear this all the time from that phrase, I'm afraid of numbers. I don't do well with math. And that's the mental health professional piece of this conversation. Now, for the financial planners, I think, there's so many parallels there too, that ultimately, we're all human, human first, and we can't see what we can't see. Right. And it takes having a therapist to work through some roadblocks, right? Some impasses. In that same way, a financial advisor may need to do some of this work similar to the work of the self of the financial therapist, the self of a financial advisor, and things like that. And that's where Calm Money comes in.
Yeah.
It comes in because the book itself and I should kind of backtrack a little bit if you don't mind. So the project unveiled in the following way. I mentioned to you that client that I just spoke to, and she was actually one of the biggest impeti for writing, engaging in this project, because she lost her job as executive. She was going through a divorce at the same time, and
Oh,
she was
woof.
just overwhelmed in just a state of extreme activation, right? One of my favorite questions in the therapy room is, what do you need right now? What do you need right now? It's an experiential question. What do you need right now to dial down the activation? What do you need right now to feel okay, at least in the here and now, in the moment? Let's not jump ahead and think of, tomorrow or even the next minute. What do you need right now? And she sat there and she kind of, really checked in with herself. And she said, when I was in therapy in the past, and she's had, previous family of origin trauma, she said, I used to journal a lot, and that used to help me a lot. And I said, well, there it is. Let's start there. And she started to journal. She started to bring the journaling into the room, and we started reading it together. And then, of course, in the back of my mind, I started thinking, well, why, with so many different journaling options out there, why doesn't something like that exist in the financial wellness space? So first came the financial wellness journal, the 90-day workbook. And then once that kind of got, first drafted and, half completed, I just felt like there's a book that needs to be put in front of it. And the book needed to be born. And so I'm so glad, it was born on 2/12/26, and that it finally came out.
All of, 3 pounds, 2 ounces.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Very healthy. And green, I hear green as well. I love that idea of journaling. And in different parts of my own life personally have found it really, really helpful, and have certainly encouraged clients to go through and utilize that. I would love to know, if you're willing to share, what are some of the maybe journal prompts in like Calm Money? Like, I'm just thinking financial self-care, like, what are some of these journal prompts, if you don't mind sharing maybe a few?
So thank you. And when we mentioned the how to a little bit earlier in our episode, the journal really kind of brings together the practical and the emotional and kind of puts it into the same room. And it gives you like enough structure to create traction, but without it turning money into another place where you fail or another hot stove moment, right? Again, I wanted this book to be extremely empathic. I wanted this book to be like a financial self-care companion wherever you go. And so each check-in, it pairs a concrete action with some inner work. We talk about like daily reflections. We talk about the money weather. Are you stressed? Are you avoidant? Are you impulsive or urgent
But I
around?
like that. Money
You
weather.
feel
Oh, that's
shame. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
exactly. And then still kind of making a doable plan around what you need to do today. Of course, there's weekly check-ins, and you're at that point, from a weekly standpoint, you're really connecting the dots and looking for patterns and looking what beliefs are driving some of your behavior. So there's real accountability.
Mm.
And when we really, kind of broaden out to and zoom out to the monthly reflections, we really get to see what's the money story that we're telling ourselves. It's right there on paper. And is this the money story that I want to tell? And here's the real ability to change that money story.
Yeah, I like that part, the reframe, right? Kind of
Exactly.
part. Yeah.
Now, there's also, some practical aspects. I don't want it to overwhelm people who are sort of money avoidant and money averse, and they'll put the book down immediately. But there are some helpful tips, and that it creates a certain cadence and a rhythm. Part of the journal piece is understanding that it creates a muscle memory, right? A muscle memory that then carries and reshapes our experience of money and with money. So there's a rhythm, and this rhythm is simple. And this is what I call a daily financial hygiene, where you just keep tabs on your accounts. You log in the beginning. It's for some clients, it's that huge hurdle that it seems impossible to jump over. But with time and regular tending to that, it becomes possible and easier with every step. We look at cash flow, if that's an issue. There's aspects to the journal where we talk about the 24-hour rule for people who are kind of impulsive and have a hard time with shopaholism, with shopping, and especially taming that impulse, right? So we need a little bit of a buffer. And from a similar lens, there's a context of having a spending threshold. So these are really kind of practical. They're not revolutionary ideas, but I guess when you put it all together, it's really, again, where the practical meets the psychological.
Well, and to some of your point that you made earlier, framing it also from a place of curiosity and being non-judgmental. And I find that, for clients, for advisors, heck, even for myself, like that's actually the hardest part is becoming curious from a non-judgmental place. Like, why is it that I respond this way? Like, why does my body respond this way when I see these numbers or when I start to think about this? Like, what is that? What's that about? Where does that come from? That's actually the, for something like the hardest part is to become curious and non-judgmental. And so I love that what you're talking about, with this book and workbook with Call Money is that, yeah, is putting maybe together a lot of tips and strategies. And sure, I hear you, like they're not revolutionary. Although I would imagine there's probably a lot of them in there that most people are like, good golly, I never thought about it like that way. That might be revolutionary,
There
but
might be just reminders, right?
it might be
We all
reminders,
need
but
reminders,
when
exactly.
you combine that with
Yeah.
curiosity and, a non-judgmental approach, like it really can be really powerful from an experience place. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to getting my copy of Call Money and diving in and highlighting all the things in there. Now, as we wrap up the show today, I would love maybe if you could just share like there's obviously a lot, Alex, that you and I could talk about. And as we were, joking about before we hit record, we could probably talk for a few hours about a lot of different things. But, in thinking about Call Money and maybe what you would like for advisors to know or to take away, is there anything else there that you would say to them?
I guess I really want to emphasize and implore that call money. I think of call money as a prerequisite for any financial planner working with clients who are struggling with financial stress. Because, again, the best plan in the world won't stick if a client's nervous system is, in that threat mode, in fight or flight, and if they're avoiding, shutting down, or reacting to shame. Most important is taming that inner tiger, inner lion, and restoring their emotional well-being so that they can respond instead of react.
Yeah, I think that
And
makes a lot of sense.
teaching the clients how to do that through this book. And also by reading this book yourselves, the financial planners, you get to learn the language that would resonate with your client. You will speak the same language as the client. You will embody some of that non-judgmental stance that you just mentioned, Ashley. And I love that. I feel like one of the most powerful words in mental health and in therapy is notice. Notice what's happening because it is non-judgmental, it's disarming. And I actually remember this whole topic being covered by Todd Cashden. I think you were there at the FTA conference in Denver. And he did an amazing job describing the difference between a closed mindset and an open mindset. When we have that curious stance, when we just start to notice, it evokes and evolves that curiosity that helps us to want more, to learn more, instead of just kind of being closed off to what's coming next.
Yeah. I love that. What a wonderful way to end us here. Alex, well, if people want more Dr. Alex in their life, if they want more of you, if they want more Call Money, share with us, if you don't mind, where can they find you? Where can they get more Alex?
Sure. So you and I know each other through the FTA and, of course, through LinkedIn. So I'm very involved with the LinkedIn community as Dr. Alex, and my company is Financial Psychology Center. So you can find me both on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can also find me at financialpsychologycenter.com. And of course, both of my books, but of course, Calm Money is now available on Amazon. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and just show the QR code that I have for your audience.
Yes, yep. And so for those of you watching video right now, you'll be able to see this. For those of you who are listening, you will have to go into the show notes to click on that link there, and you can grab that. You can grab your own copy there of Calm Money. And for those of you listening who cannot see the book, the cover, it's a nice, calming green cover. So it really does even aesthetically embody everything that is calm. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing all about financial self care, financial or calm money, just all the things. I am so grateful to be able to have this conversation with. For those of you that are tuning in, that are listening, thank you for allowing Alex and I into your ears and into your mind today. If this conversation resonated with you, I think I speak for both of us in saying that we would love to stay connected. We would love to keep that connection going. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, where I hang out probably way too much, sharing insights on the human side of money and financial psychology. If you want more Ashley Quamme, I'm not saying that you do, but if you want more Ashley Quamme, if you want more Beyond the Plan, you can check out our monthly newsletter at www.beyondthefp.com. But most importantly, make sure that you follow the show, Planning and Beyond. Make sure that you follow the show so that you never miss a future conversation like this one. And as always, my friends, remember, finances don't have feelings, but your clients do. Until next time, keep planning, keep growing, and keep going beyond.